Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at the moment. I appreciate we may have an international grouping of people. My name's Tom Jenkins. I work at ETOA, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Shingo San and Stefano San from Mickey Travel and JTB, who are two of the largest companies uh, handling this specialist area. What I'm going to do is I'll ask them to introduce themselves, and then I've got a few slides just to place our conversation in context. But Shingo-san, please just say hello.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Shingo from Mickey Travel London. I'm working as a managing director of Mickey Travel, and we are taking care of all the hotel, local services purchasing all in Europe where we operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Shingo-san. Stefano-san.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Nice to meet everyone on this call. And I was just mentioning to Shingo-san before we start the connection that my first experience within Japanese company actually was indeed Mickey Travel. That started around 1994. Since then, I kept working through Japanese company, moving through Mickey, JAL, Japanese airline, and finally JTB. I represent Coordinating Lar by JTB, and I'm looking after all the procurement strategy across Europe, mainly for hotels. And thank you for inviting us, Tom, and thank you everybody to taking the time.
Thank you both. One thing I ought to stress is that this is being recorded, so you can view this webinar at a later date. And one thing I would plead with everyone is that it's really useful to keep the flow of conversation going. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A or in the chat. I'll be filtering them backwards and forwards, but the Q&A would be a great place if you've got anything to ask. And we have two very distinguished people here to help answer questions. Please use that facility. Now I will just share my screen and I will move on. Let's go for it. Webinar is really just part of the preparation of us having a new showcase event, which is going to take place in September, showcasing Japan as an origin market. We will be having many discussions like this and perhaps more detailed than this about the Japanese market. And we'll be having an in-person marketplace in Japan surrounding Expo. But all the details about this are available on our website, and really everybody is welcome to both view what we're doing and take part in what we're doing. Now, I just have a few slides here which are have been taken really from a presentation by David Edwards, and this will be both circulated and updated as we progress. There are a number of pre-recorded statements he's made on this subject, but I think it would be good for us to have a quick look at the general picture of what's going on. Now, when it comes to Japan, I think there's no doubt the Japanese outbound market was quite severely affected by COVID. I mean, that would be an understatement. The total volume of people leaving Japan in 2019 was about 20 million. It recovered to about 13.5 million in 2024. This was prepared before we had the latest data for 25. I think 25, it got up to about 16 million. So it's in full recovery mode, but it hasn't quite got, or hadn't quite got last year to where we were in 2019, which was obviously a peak year for Japanese outbound travel. And if you look at the general expenditure that's going on, again, we're struggling to get back to the sort of figures we saw in 2019, and we're way off the figures that were being occurred in 2004, 2005. Now, this is entirely understandable for all sorts of reasons, because as we'll see in a minute, we've had big changes in the nature of people's ability to travel to Europe, and Europe. You will notice it in this on this slide prepared by JTB. that Europe is one of the most popular places when people are contemplating going on holiday. This is a measure of the propensity of people when they're being interviewed in Japan. Where would you like to go on vacation? And the answer is Europe is the #1 destination they'd like to go to. Now that's very, very different from what they actually do so, but it proves that Europe still looms very large in the Japanese traveler's imagination. And if you look at where they go to in Europe, it's obviously dominated by Italy, which is one of the great destinations for the Japanese industry, followed by Spain, France, Germany, and then Great Britain. A lot of these, of course, are destinations which form part of a multi-country product. Not all of these people, or even only a proportion of these people, are going for individual country exercises, but you will notice that a lot of these, like Switzerland and Austria, will probably form part of a wider European tour product. Now, the estimated and forecast visits from Japan to Europe is put together by ETC, and you'll notice that in 24, the volume of people coming from Japan had declined, and we'll touch on the reasons for that. But it's still expected to grow up to 6.5 million people by 2029. This is the forecast from ETC, and that's contingent, I imagine, on a few things happening over which we have no control. But there is still, for those in the know, and the ETC is the European Travel Commission, which is the umbrella body for all the national tourist offices in Europe. They're still very confident that we're looking at a new peak by the end of this decade. The big factor, one of the factors underlying the way in which the market is changing in Japan is there's no doubt that the population in Japan is declining. This is obviously going to cause all kinds of challenges for Japan as a society. It's not necessarily terrible for the travel industry to have an aging population with money and with time. Don't forget the two things that you need if you're going to go on a long haul holiday is you need money and you need time. If you've got a greater proportion of the population with money and time, hey, that's not necessarily terrible. The projection, this is the caption here, is that we're expecting, or people are expecting, a decline by another 18 million over the next quarter of a century. It's possible that Japan may dip below the 100 million mark, which is in some ways extraordinary news. Now, if you look at the actual demographic shape of Japan at the moment, this is starting, this decline is starting to be shown in the shape of the market. As I alluded to a few moments ago, this is an aging market, and with 36%, nearly 40% of the population are now over 60. Some of us don't think that remotely unusual or bad, but it is a definite characteristic of this market that it is growing older. This demographic pattern, which is the grey and green here, show you that these people, that proportion is just going to be growing over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. The population change, this is just a slide which illustrates the dynamics behind that. They think by 2035, you're going to see nearly, an additional 3 million, I think they're saying here, of people aged in the 60 and over age group, whereas the 45 to 59 is going to see a significant drop. Now, the propensity to travel outbound, again, this is a question, it's not asking people where they are going, but are you wanting to go on a vacation outside Japan? This is a question posed by JTB to a sample group in Japan. And you'll notice that by far the biggest group thinking that they want to go outside Japan are actually females at age 20 to 29. So women in their 20s is the biggest outbound group, not necessarily the one that goes to Europe, I hasten to add, but the ones that think they want to go on a holiday. This is, this is a really significant portion of the population, a shrinking proportion of the population, but a really significant part of the population. Women under 30 really would like to go on a foreign vacation. Now, if you then look at the people who actually came it's a different picture. And I'm not sure what sort of question that poses to people framing products for this market, but the desire to go on an outbound holiday is not reflected in the people actually coming to Europe. This is a survey done by Visit Britain, and it's assuming that the split that you've got in Britain is echoed throughout Europe. And I've got no way of verifying whether this is actually true, but it's an indication of the reality that there are actually more men in the 25 to 34 age bracket traveling than there are women. So the imagination of wanting to go on a holiday and the actuality of doing so, there is a sort of a split. And just to give it in context, Japan is still growing, but it's not growing as fast as other places. So if you look at those of us who are in the high days of the 1990s, where Japan really was a sort of dominant economic figure in the world, it no longer has that position. And this is the share of global GDP, which kind of reflects their purchasing power when moving in Europe, really. It's gone down. And Japan has not got any poorer, but just a lot of other places who were very, very poor have now got richer. So it just means that the sort of potency of their purchasing is not the same as it was. Furthermore, if you look at it over this very long period, from really over the last 20 years, the purchasing power of the yen hasn't declined really. If you look at it in the years since 2020, you notice there's really been a remarked drop in the value of the yen as against the euro. And in fact, it's an almost 30%. Euros are almost 30% more expensive. Now, this has lots of implications. I mean, the first one is that Japan has suddenly found itself a major destination as a tourism destination. And those of us going to Japan will notice that there are a lot more Caucasians floating around Japan than there ever used to be. And this is causing issues in Japan, but it really need not affect us when it comes to Europe as a destination. What does matter is that Europe has to be as cost effective as possible when dealing with this market. Question is, how do they book? And a really significant part of the Japanese traveler community either books some or all of their product through a tour operator. Effectively, this is 60% or 65% of what's happening is round about. Is booking either the whole package or some elements as part of the package through an intermediary. So, the tour operator role in this area still is really important. And how do they book this package? You will notice that, a significant portion book it through a price comparison site. Others use an online marketplace, but a large portion of this, again, is using, 46 or 56% is there with is using a tour operator, a travel agent, to do so. So again, the Japanese travel market is one where people such as Shingo-san and Stefano-san are actually crucial in the delivery of product to that market. And that is the end of my little snapshot of the situation. Some of this, there's some obvious challenges there. I think one of the striking feature selling to Asia as a whole and Japan in particular is the fact that there has been a complete reduction in the capacity of flights and ability of flights to fly from Japan to Europe with the closure of Russian airspace. The fact that there is a land war in Europe, which is made manifest to anybody trying to fly from Japan to Europe, is not a plus when it comes to any incoming visitor. I think also that the additional pricing that this extra flying time represents and the extra hours that this represents is a major disincentive for people to coming. And we've now got the new problem of the Gulf being closed off, but we will touch on that. So this is not all good news. The one thing I would like to stress before we start is that why are we having this discussion? We're having this discussion for three really important reasons. Firstly, Japan is a pioneer in bringing Asian travelers to Europe. They were the first people outside, the wider European diaspora to come in any volume into Europe in the early 60s and 70s. And that means that the process of bringing people to Europe and the people who bring people to Europe, the companies and the commercial infrastructure that brings people to Europe and Japan, these are old friends. This is not a saturated market, but these are old people who know this industry, and you can't have new old friends. This is really important. This is a relationship which Europe has to foster. It can't calmly switch around to new markets like this. It's really important that we understand Japan and we get it right. The second thing to point out is that universally, whenever anybody has surveyed this, Japanese clients are always regarded as the best clients you can have. Not simply from purchasing power, but in terms of not simply in the fact that they're famously polite and appreciative, even when things aren't going right, as far as the receptive areas are concerned, they're immaculately behaved. But also they are really sophisticated. Time and time again, I'm struck by when I go to places and I ask a fairly obscure question about the origin of the silk in a shop. I get told the only people who ask me that question are Japanese visitors. These are the best customers you can have. And thirdly, it remains a really important source of money. And I think also for I think Europe has to remember that for the Japanese industry, Europe is a very important destination. They don't make that much money selling holidays in Vietnam. They make money selling holidays in Europe. So everyone is in this boat to get it right. Anyway, with that thought, I just want to switch over to the panelists and just start off with Shingo-san. What is the situation looking like now? We've just looked at the situation up until now. It looks like it was coming back. What does 26 look like?
Thank you for very useful information providing, Tom. It's really useful. And I just wanted to add some more information that I just quickly check that a comparison with other destination, how that, the portion, the ratio of the visitor coming to Europe to the all outbound Japanese visitors. And then with before the COVID and also 2025. So only the Europe destination and also Asia destination is increased, portion is increased, has increased. For example, Europe destination, the portion of the total outbound visitors in Japan, Japanese tourists before the COVID, let's say 2019, it was 11.7%. Now, 2025, this increased to the 12.2. Of course, this is only slightly increase, only 0.5%. However, and also Asia region, from 70.5% to 72.8%, which is a 2.3% increase. However, North America destination, minus 1.4%. Hawaii, minus 2.6% down. And also Oceania, 0%, just the same. And also other destination, minus 0.2% down. Only Europe destination increased to 0.5%. So on those Asia destination, very simple. Just, it's a very, how do I say, less expensive destination. So like as Tom, you mentioned that maybe, let's say, working age of population, it's a very easy to visit for short holidays, less expensive. So only Asia destination, Europe destination has increased compared with before the COVID, which is, I think, still very nice fact for Europe destination. So I'm really proud. This is a one thing. And also that another thing that I have to say is that Japanese market is definitely polarized. This is something that I have to mention. So how do I say? Wealthy individuals, wealthy maybe a group size, they are more want to spend more time, want to spend more money in the destination. This is definitely happening. So we are really, really working hard to encourage these two tourist people to spend in the destination while they travel in Europe. But working age population, unfortunately, it's not possible, honestly speaking. Something that I'm feeling that for young people, or let's say working age people, destination to Europe is something like like uh, like a very big investment for the so creating their career or changing their life overview. So this is something that today I wanted to highlight first time.
That's a really good point. I think you're right that there is, and it's interesting even in the North American market where we're looking at best a flatlining of demand. And don't get me wrong, North America has boomed for the last 3 years, but we're looking at a flatlining of demand overall. But the top end of the market, there's no diminution. These guys are traveling, and it's still going up at the top end, but overall it isn't. Now, Stefan, what is your perception? Just, I mean, what does 26 look like from your point of view?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting, first of all, to hear Shingo-san, and of course, we are pretty much seeing the same situation. But I also wanted to say it kind of felt when you introduced us, when you called Stefano-san, I thought, oh, okay, I'm very Japanese today. But just, I think it's important to say, because actually, of course, I'm not Japanese, I'm Italian. And my let's say my journey with Japan to understand the culture, the business, is actually being perhaps on a different approach than a Japanese person. And so I've been very interested in how the Japanese market also has changed. So not to contradict any of this conversation, but again, maybe to add to what Shingo-san has mentioned, we have to remind ourselves that this is what I find very interesting of Japan is still a population that, even though is so ahead of in the trends and the society, how they live, but we're still looking at a country that has 1 out of 5 in the population have a passport. So this is quite stunning when we compare it to our trend in Europe. So there is a lot of opportunity there, but at the same time, I think again, from the other side, from the point of view of a traveler into Japan, when I travel extensively in Japan, and I always felt that maybe these days we also have to remind ourselves that Europe is no longer competing with other destinations, is actually competing with Japan itself. I remember 20 years ago when I used to talk to people in the street in Japan. They, as Shingo-san mentioned, they were saying for them Europe was a kind of dream coming true, one of a lifetime journey. Now, when you talk to younger people, the first comment that they make is they want to discover Japan. They are interested in Japan. So the challenge there is how do we create opportunities? And I think the takeaway is the opportunity is not just to attract Japanese traveler, but also to understand how Japanese market has changed during the years, right? So, for example, I remember in my early days, the Japanese market for the tour operator in handling business into Europe, it meant large group adding several destinations in one, consolidated in one tour. And what I see now is the trend of changing that into monotour, first of all. And then what we see in the trend, especially for the JTB side, is that the groups are becoming smaller, and the FIT, and I think you showed, Tom, exactly that. When you're looking at young travelers, especially girls, they like to travel on their own. So it means they are more inclined to organize by the trip by themselves or maybe with another friend. And this is the trend that we see. And of course, as you mentioned, the growth after the pandemic is not being as we hope, as we expected, but still it's been, I think when we're looking at JTB, we still see we are about 70% growing compared to pre-pandemic, so compared to the numbers of 2019. So the potential is there. Maybe the trend has also shifted a little bit more into the FIT and small group market.
I think, can I just to touch on 26, because it's one of the issues that everyone's worrying about at the moment, and we maybe get it out of the way quickly. What is the impact of the Gulf at the moment? Is that are there many sort of technical operational problems being thrown out? And are many people flying from Japan through the Gulf? I mean, for the Indian market, for example, this is a huge issue that the Gulf crisis has removed one of the great interchange centers for people traveling to Europe. Is there a problem being thrown up by this, Shingo-san? Is this a big issue, or is it? It's not a problem.
Oh, you mean the Middle East?
Yeah.
Yeah. I cannot deny, honestly speaking. You know, this is not really happening from this current situation, but very beginning the invasion to Ukraine. This is I mean, I think a very big risk or important, because that since so Russia started to invade Ukraine, all the so Japanese or European airline cannot fly over the Russian sector, and including JTB, many of travel agents has started to utilize as a replacement, to fly via Middle East like Qatar or Emirates, and then now it's this it's a collapse. So they are all all these series packages to a segment are really forced to cancel or postpone or reduce the air seats, something very affected. So however, as Stefano-san mentioned, that what we have to do is that we see more movement for FIT segment rather than this kind of series package segment anymore. And then I live in London, and when we walk through the Piccadilly Circus or Covent Garden or anywhere in the downtown, I see so many, very specifically, mother and daughter. These two people, individuals movement are really significant, I have to say. And I sometimes say to, are you Japanese? And you are the mother and daughter. Yes, we are traveling because father don't want to come to Europe. But just I'm more than happy to to give you money, and just so you can go. And then just daughter, mother, always this couple coming to Europe, but not father. But I believe that father or let's say male tourists really want to have the very specific purpose to travel. Maybe mother and daughter is that they can enjoy the time regardless any any of event. This is something that I think also I want to add.
Stefano.
Yeah, well, exactly like Shingo-san mentioned at the beginning. I mean, JTB, yes, the complication is exactly the fact that when I looked, as soon as the Middle East conflict started, you can see that we could see that actually the almost 50% of JTB package included a flight that would go through and stop over into the Middle East. So the impact actually has been quite huge. And the complication here, as it was introduced by you, Tom, is that first we had the Ukraine that caused the direct. So actually, this impact the more let's say the higher category of airline like JAL, ANA, because they could not fly directly anymore, and increase the more the middle size, the one that will offer like Air China or like the Middle East carriers, and then with the Middle East crisis, that complicated even more that. So I think is the combination. Also, as you mentioned, Tom, the combination of the fact that you cannot get the space as outbound to go to Japan. So we have to remind ourselves these are the same carrier that then they will need to give the space to our client to travel to Europe. What the result of all of this is, how do we cope with that change? Of course, we find alternative airlines and alternative routes. However, this is the impact. I think the first impact is directly on the cost, which connect to the bigger other challenge, which is when I talk to people in Europe, like myself, everyone think, oh, this is the best time to go to Japan. Why? Because the yen is weak. You can go shopping and be happy coming back with a full luggage of your personal shopping. That also means, to the contrary, for a Japanese traveler, I would say without doubt, no matter if you buy the package from HIS, from JTB, if you look at the cost of the package pre-pandemic to what is costing us to go to Europe, it's definitely at least double. And this is, of course, we have to consider that as one of the big challenge. Nevertheless, I think is probably along the line of what we said before, we have to see that Europe is probably still see it as a special trip for Japanese client, where perhaps Hawaii, Korea, Taiwan are more for the kind of repeat traveler. So it's where Europe is remaining one-off and a special one. That's why I think the operation side and how we deliver to the expectation of the client is very key for the Japanese market.
Well, the difficulty with answering this question, and you've both been incredibly graceful at handling it, is that we don't really know what the situation is going to be looking at in the Gulf. And people come up with horror stories like we're going to run out of aviation fuel in the next 6 weeks, and various other statements about which we have no control. We don't know if it's going to happen or if it does. I was asked the other day about this, and I said it's a bit like the road warning sign you see occasionally, one of those triangular signs with warning you of falling rocks. And I always thought, whenever I see that sign, what am I supposed to do if a 2-ton rock lands on me? I suppose it's useful to be told, at least you know what's happening to you, but there's very little you can do about it. And I feel like we're being given a warning that a major disaster might happen, but we're not sure. And all we can do is carry on, and we are, and that's what we're doing. And I'm astonished at the resilience of the market in these circumstances. Let's go back a long time. Remember things. Sorry, just remember things like 91, and there wasn't an industry in 91 because of fear. Now people are resilient. Shingo-san.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight one thing that even though we are affecting quite big of this, current conflict from the Middle East, however, I have to say that, as I said, the market definitely has polarized, and then the wealthy, side people definitely, the flight arrangement is just one of the technical side for the travel agent. If travel agent can provide, okay, your price can be increased, but we can provide a replacement, it's an alternative arrangement for coming to Europe. Then they are more than happy because, as I said, these people don't hesitate to spend anything about if they feel that, okay, sense of satisfaction, okay, it's worth to pay, then they are very much happy. So replacement is flight is just of the very small part of technical operation side. What they want to do is that what's the sense of satisfaction from this travel? This is something that we need to tackle. So I don't want to criticize that, something that this current conflict makes our arrangement. Of course, in short term, we may have some cancellation, but we have to see this is also that our opportunity to reflect ourselves, what kind of opportunity we can give them. It's really, really, we need to consider as Europe, our travel industry side, what kind of product we can provide them. Definitely, they will continue to come. That I have to say.
No,
So,
what you're saying is that this is, if I can re-echo what you're saying, and it's a really good point. Don't get distracted by temporary problems. Let's concentrate on the product that we've got, because that's the thing we can affect, and let's try and make sure that's good. And I think uh, for those of us who've been to Japan, and I think a lot of Europeans are intimidated by the quality of the service economy in Japan. And there is so much to learn from Japan in terms of I don't think we even have a word for what's it omotenashi, I think is the phrase in Japan, but you probably can correct my pronunciation. But the sense of welcome and hospitality. And years ago, we had a seminar where one of your predecessors, Shiga-san, I think, got up and said, "Look, in Europe, you have this phrase, the customer is king." Uh, this is not good enough. The customer is God. It's very very clear, and you've got to understand this if you wish to compete in that market. And the idea that we are competing with Japan is a very pertinent one, and it's also quite a challenge. Now, if I may, we've got questions here, all of which are very pertinent, and I salute those of you who've sent them through. Uh, One of the ones is, what's the biggest social media platform used by Japanese travelers? We hear of RAD and WeChat in China. Is there an equivalent in Japan? Stefano, what would
Sure.
your reply to be to that?
Sure. Yeah, again, it's very personal experience that became also a company experience. When I started to travel to Japan, social media was very basic, but so the first discovery of social media in Japan for me was Line. And actually, Line is now not only one of the most common um, platform, but is also used across. So JTB, for example, use Line as a way to communicate with the client, to promote, to send promotion. And Line, what I found interesting is the peak of Line grew with the during the year of the tsunami, because the network across Japan fell, but the Line was one of the most common platform used to communicate between people, and it is definitely for me one of the biggest impact in terms of compared to, as you mentioned, what we see in China with WeChat. And I hope, even though I'm not Shingo-san will agree, but maybe there are more that let's say for us in JTB, Line is one of the most used to communicate with the clients.
Would you agree that, Shiga-san?
yeah, obviously, Line has been used for more daily communication too, as a chat or messages. But I believe that many of people are using, obviously, like 30s, 40s, 50s has been using the Instagram to check where the beautiful place or where the picturesque place, and then I believe many of people are referring the many people from uploading such a beautiful snapshot, short movies for Instagram. But as Stefano-san mentioned, that most of people using Line to make a communication, sending many chats. I totally agree with Stefano-san.
we have a live question coming in, and folks, please put your questions in the live chat. The previous ones we'll come to in a minute, but we've got one coming in from Maria, simply saying, what makes Japanese travelers return to a destination? So it's not what you do to get them to Europe in the first place. What would make them come back? Stefano, have you got a theory on this?
Yes, theory maybe, but yeah, what I was thinking, that as we and maybe Shingo-san mentioned before, Europe has this kind of for Japanese market is the view of a beautiful place. This is what I think, the experience of Mount Saint Michel or the Colosseum, but what I would say one thing that probably gets Japanese client to return is not only the multiple variety. I mean, when you showed the numbers, Tom, of, for example, Italy to be a key destination, what has changed in Italy is that 20 years ago, Japanese client will need to include Rome, Florence, Milan as a sect. That's all they wanted to visit. If you propose them alternative routes or secondary destination, they would not be interested. They would not sell. Now is almost the opposite. They discover, they know the main destination, maybe through, as Shingo-san mentioned, beautiful pictures, but they started to see that it's becoming more and more attractive to visit secondary destination like Sicily, like south of Italy, that were never considered before. So one thing I would say, they see Europe as beautiful, but perhaps also they see Europe as, compared to Japan, as ever changing. So when you look at how London was 10 years ago, it is not the way London is today. There are a lot different attraction that used to be there, and I think this covers for most of the destination in Europe. So perhaps one of the attraction for the Japanese market to see Europe not only just as a beautiful destination, but as a destination that's also ever changing, and with that change, they feel attracted by the opportunity, I would say.
Shingo-san, what brings the second visitor back?
I don't think that the let's say mass tourism which we ever handled will not work anymore, honestly speaking. But Tom, do you know the Tomatina in Spain? Tomatina event.
Keep going.
Yeah, okay. Just this tomatina is the many people gathering in one place and throw the many tomato away to the other.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have utilized this kind of event together that are tourists from Japan and let's join together. But many people feel if this is a safe or how to join and if we can organize the FYT package tour, including this kind of specific event, then many people are sure that they are interested. So what we would like to, as the Mickey want to do, seek more these specific event in everywhere Europe, like Bordeaux Winery Fair or Bourgogne, Bourgogne wine tasting tour, or this kind of very specific, we can find very specific these event, and then we create so many activities in everywhere. And we don't expect so much gathering together, so much people, but just a small portion, but so many products. And then definitely, Japanese tourists show their interest to this kind of specific experiences. So not trying to hold this just beautiful Mont Saint Michel or Colosseum or Vatican, but very specific event. We want to find more specific local event and organize small people package tour, small activity, but producing so many activities in every area in Europe. That we want to do.
Yeah, you've completely surprised me. I mean, I understand the experiential nature of trying to promote vivid experiences. It's the first time I've ever heard of adding more tomatoes, but we will run with that one. And the good news about the tomato event is I know it well. All that happens is you get tomatoes. You don't get the problems with going to Pamplona and running with bulls, for instance, which carries all sorts of other complications. Now, look, thank you. I think this is very wise. We've got another question, a whole set of questions being posed uh, by one individual, many of whom we've covered on. But one salient point being raised is, and it's a very UK point, what is the main, could you give me the main reason why Japanese people come to the UK? Stefano, have you got this a perception on this?
Well, certainly one point that we discovered through the years is that first of all, the appeal from the Japanese market, that one of the key point is the language, right? I mean, for Japanese, of course, English is one of the key language to learn, and they know. So even at a student, I remember we used to handle huge student groups, and they always had to have London as a destination, and that kind of remind me to, as Shingo-san mentioned at the beginning, when daughter and mother travel, they think, okay, this is the easier part, right? I mean, they can travel, they feel at least they can understand the basics. So perhaps even for the individual traveler, UK will be appealing for that. But also, it's of course the heritage that we have in UK with the royal, the literature. I think the history does help have an impact, but is probably for the Japanese market one of the destinations that is perceived easier to travel around with because of the language.
Shingo, if you're selling the UK, what works? I mean, why do people come here?
I don't think this is simple reason, but I believe that basic understanding, I mean, could be. I think UK people and also Japanese people has a quite sense of how do I say, affinity or empathy, because so we have both royal family, long so understanding history, and both people are really try to understand each other and coming so cultural exchanges and similarities of the character. I don't know, but this is something I understand. And also maybe footballs. I don't know, golf or tennis and also maybe very organized travel, and also that so we don't have to have the any basically worry to travel. Everything organized, so many informations. This is something that I think this kind of complex, I mean, several conditions are already prepared very well. This is something I'm feeling. This could be very personal impression.
But these impressions are important, and I'm delighted to hear that we have a reputation for being organised. I flew in from I flew in from Valencia yesterday into Stansted Airport and changed trains at Highbury and Islington Station. Lots of things I was feeling, but that it was organised wasn't the first impression I got. But this was that's neither here nor there. We've got another question here, which is, how well is European tourism sector prepared in terms of products and services to attract Japanese travelers and then sustain increased travel flows? I suppose it's a version of our last question on the UK, but I mean, I suppose what could we get better at would be the question. If I could summarize that. I mean, Stefano, where do you think there are rooms for improvement that can be delivered? I mean, we could improve the situation by having public, electronic lavatories of a 5-star standard, immaculately presented in every bus station, but we're not going to get there. But is there anything that we could do that is possible?
Well, I think from the point of view of a company, I speak for ourselves, but also for the suppliers, so for the market that we are trying to bring the business to. Definitely, and I know it's perhaps sounds a little bit like conceptual, but for me, it's definitely have a simplicity. For example, on the transportation, and as you mentioned, the clear information. I don't. Let's say I think Europe doesn't need to create more attraction, but it's definitely there is a need of making things a bit easier to use. Like for example, Shingo-san, maybe as a foreign, when I travel to Japan, this is the bigger thing that I see is that how easy it is to the clarity of moving around the island, even with a limitation on the language. And I imagine this is pretty much the same for a Japanese person traveling to Europe. Sometimes there is a gap, right, when you travel between one country to the other, of how they can move and how. So I think it's really the product that we have in Europe are already very attractive. Maybe if we can all make it a little bit easier for the Japanese client to move around, and when they come to inside a restaurant or inside an attraction, perhaps a bit easier. One thing that I noticed, for example, is that often you see with the trend of the market increasing, like Russian in the past or the Chinese, there is a lot of indication in or menu choice where there will be in Chinese or in Russian. Very few are in Japanese, and that's something that I think takes very little to do.
And it's simple messages of welcome, really, is what you're saying. Shingo, I mean, is there anything we can do in Europe that you think would materially help the situation?
Yeah, as we don't have much more time left, so just quickly, one point I want to mention is that, Tom, basically, Japanese travel agent, Japanese travel industry recognize that on season, off season. On season starts from always from the April to October, and off season is November to March. But as we all of us know that now, because of the global warming, that March is getting more warmer here in Europe and easy to travel. And then, however, still airlines or hotels or even ourselves, a travel agent, are recognizing that March is still off season and we don't have much variety of the flight variation, or still something that not really much inventory the hotels. But we should encourage the Japanese tourists that you can start coming from the maybe March is not anymore on off season. Then it's getting warmer, and so flowers blooming, getting beautiful. But there still is a March in Europe is something that's snowing and cold, but it's definitely changing. So expanding that, recognizing on season could be the one of that maybe initiative we can work on. This is something that I want to mention.
Well, thank you, Shiga-san. You're talking from my playbook. I was going to end by saying that don't forget there is an ETOA event coming up very shortly called the Shoulder and Off Peak Marketplace, where we're encouraging everybody to go for shoulder and off peak tourism for multiple reasons, not least of which it's one of the areas that intermediaries, tour operators add value to a destination. Bringing people in high season doesn't make you appreciated. Bringing people when they're wanted is appreciated.
Exactly.
And also the people have a lot less crowded time is the other point. It's in some ways a different experience, and in some ways a better experience. I think that's a very valid point. Someone's pointed in that Scotland is stunning in March. I have a feeling that Leanne McKay probably thinks that Scotland is stunning at every time of year, and I would agree if you made that assertion. So I am very, very delighted that people all the time, indeed, is the reply. We've got a good commentary going on the webinar chat. Now, this is a question posed by an old friend of ETOA, Sabina Lutka. How can we persuade Japanese to spend longer time in Europe? You know, this is one of the great things that all national tourist offices ask. It's my penultimate question. Stefano, is there an easy fix? Extend your holiday by 2 days?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about probably the just yeah to extend, but again, maybe to the previous comment that I made is also to not create too complex itinerary. Now these days we have a lot more regional combination, and maybe as Shingo-san mentioned, a lot more events that prevail compared to the past. I mean, I cannot stop thinking, how did I see the Japanese market when I begin to work with that? And my perception was, okay, I know what Japanese market is this group coming to San Marco, taking 200 pictures and disappearing within half an hour, right? And now maybe more like Shingo-san has mentioned, there is the wish of actually having an experience, maybe the type of experience that you cannot put on Instagram, but that you want to live. And this is more, I would say, more opportunities regionally. So allow, yes, of course, destination like London, being also a hub, to be the arrival point. But there are so many attractive regional attraction that could combine, and this is what, as Shinko-san mentioned, not just Miki, but across, we are trying to build more. Okay, it's hard to say tailor-made, because as a tour operator, you cannot handle every client with a different itinerary, but definitely to cater for clients that want and wish to have more of an experience that is not captured simply on a camera or on an Instagram picture.
Yeah, Shingo, is there a last word you want to make?
Yeah, actually, Tom, it's already happening. Before the COVID, our average length of the itinerary was 7 days, but I checked it quickly then. Our current average length of the itinerary is 9.5 days, already happening. Because of that, so these wealthy people just, so dominant, I mean, occupying more major portion of the tourists coming to Europe. So I believe the keyword is the in-destination spending money. I mean, they don't want to fix so much, very fixed itinerary, but they may prefer to spend something in destination.
Well, Shingo-san, we're reaching the end of our period. Shingo-san, Stefano-san, thank you so much for spending the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much.
It really has been an interesting conversation. And thank you, everyone in the audience, for staying on. We've got hundreds of people currently tuned in, and it shows you quite how important this discussion is. I would just end by saying that I don't think there is a more interesting or more important market for Europe, because we have so much to learn from the Japanese as clients, and there is so much wealth to be enjoyed with them. I think there are lots of things we haven't touched on which are of real importance. I know. I hope we've covered a lot of the questions that you raised beforehand and during this meeting. But I look forward to a much richer diet of discussion in Japan in September. I think one of the things I know we have not touched on is the long-running issue of the Japanese travel laws, which we may have an entire seminar on in due course. But thank you, Shingo-san. Thank you, Stefano-san. Thank you, audience. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye-bye.